But first, Israel's security cabinet has approved measures that will make it easier for settlers to buy Palestinian land in the occupied West Bank. It also weakens the already limited powers of Mahmoud Abbas's Palestinian Authority, which has described these changes as dangerous. The Israeli Finance Ministry, which is run by the far-right politician Bezalel Smotrich, issued a statement saying that they continue to bury the idea of a Palestinian state. Well, with some more details then of what the security cabinet have in place, here's our Jerusalem correspondent, Noga Tarnopolsky.
Principally, this is a statement of intention. We must remember that Prime Minister Netanyahu has entered what is supposed to be an electoral year in Israel, though elections haven't yet been set, a date hasn't been set. And Netanyahu, ahead of what is expected to be a difficult trip to Washington, D.C., where very likely he will be forced to accept Trump ceasefire terms for Gaza, which for now include Hamas staying in place, and also negotiations with Iran that for now do not seem to be going in the direction that Israel had wished. Netanyahu handed his ultra-right-wing base and his ultra-right-wing ministers some red meat in the form of what is basically soft-pedaling annexation of the West Bank. What the security cabinet voted on are basically measures which, if put into place, will allow Jews basically to appropriate, to purchase under very beneficial terms Palestinian lands, to continue to take over Palestinian national lands. And it puts Israel squarely in violation of the Oslo Accords, of which the United States is a guarantor. So it is not yet a done deal, not only until the Israeli full cabinet votes on it, and as you said, the military commander accepts it, but Donald Trump is going to have to express himself on this as well.
Well, that's Noga Tarnopolsky for us in Jerusalem. And with me live on the programme now is Gershon Baskin. He's an Israeli researcher, an activist, and he's a former hostage negotiator as well. He joins us from Jerusalem too. Good to speak to you this afternoon. Thanks for making the time.
Thank you.
Look, on your social media after this news began circulating, in the last day or so, you described these latest moves by the Israeli government as ones that advance apartheid. Tell us why.
Well, it's true. In fact, since the convening of the Netanyahu government 3 years ago and the placing of a civilian minister, Bezalel Smotrich, within the Ministry of Defense in charge of the civil administration, this was the military body that was in charge of the occupied territories, what Israel has done is simply gone in contravention to the Fourth Geneva Conventions, which had determined that the occupied territories were governed by the commander of military forces of Israel in the West Bank. Since putting it under civilian control, we have in fact seen the Israeli government take control of those territories, not the Israeli army. And as the International Court of Justice already determined, this occupation is no longer temporary. It is a permanent occupation. And these steps that the current Israeli government are making are aiming at the full annexation of the occupied West Bank.
Look, and you mentioned Bezalel Smotrich there, the finance minister of Israel. I mentioned him as well because it was his office that was pretty explicit that these series of changes are in effect about making it impossible for Palestinians to form their own contiguous state. Just explain to us how important his role is, because many people may say, look, well, he's the finance minister. Why is he making statements to this effect about the West Bank?
He is, in addition to being the finance minister, he is a minister in the Ministry of Defense and has the portfolio of being responsible for the civil administration. Civil administration is a laundered name of what used to be called the Israeli military government. There's nothing civilian about it except that it's now run by a civilian minister in the Israeli government. It is in fact the military government that governs life in the occupied territories, both for the settlers and for the Palestinians, who are the large majority of people in the occupied territories. What it means is that Smotrich, who is a person who has advanced a plan to take over the entire West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem, annex them to Israel, and to implement policies that would encourage Palestinians to leave the occupied territories. That's what's happened in the last 3 years. Certainly during the 2 years of the war in Gaza, when more than 1,000 Palestinians were killed in the West Bank, some 30 Palestinian communities have been evacuated by violent settlers, and another 100 plus settlements have been built by Smotrich over the last 2 years. So they're moving ahead with this policy. While all eyes were focused on Gaza, there are a lot of very bad and dangerous things happening within the West Bank.
And look, you say that they're moving ahead with this. It is important to emphasise, isn't it? It's the Security Cabinet that have voted on this, not Israel's full cabinet. Is this definitely going to happen?
Well, it seems that it will. If the Security Cabinet voted for it, it represents the parties that are in the Netanyahu government. It will be brought to the full government. The government will easily pass it, unless, of course, Netanyahu hears from President Trump, don't do it. It is in the hands of the Americans to be able to stop this. Unfortunately, the European Union has very little leverage over Israel, and the leverage that it has, it's been reluctant to use, so that Israel has had impunity for all of its policies in the occupied territories for many years already. If there were countries in the European Union that could get the 27 members of the European Union to change the association agreement with Israel, the trade agreement, impose sanctions on Israel, that might be a different situation. But right now, the only point of leverage in the world to prevent Israel from moving ahead with this is President Trump.
Yeah, and Benjamin Netanyahu is to meet President Trump later on this week. He's travelling to Washington, we understand, on Wednesday. So you don't believe that there will be any kind of pressure from the White House to change course on this at all?
I think that the primary nature of the meeting between Trump and Netanyahu on Wednesday will be about Iran, where Israel is trying to encourage the Americans to launch the military attack against Iran and not to negotiate just a nuclear deal with Iran. The Israelis want the Iranian deal to include its proxies and include its ballistic missiles and other issues. The people of Iran would like to see a regime change there, and Israel supports that very strongly. So Israel is definitely against a negotiated agreement with Iran right now. We don't know where President Trump stands on it, and Netanyahu was flown early to Washington to try and convince Trump not to give in to any negotiated agreement with Iran.
Just back, though, to this story that we're focusing on today, these plans by the Israeli government to make changes to the West Bank to make it easier for settlers to build there on Palestinian land. There has been some reaction from the Palestinian Authority. Let's just take a listen to a little of that reaction now.
Those decisions are illegal under international law. Israel has no sovereignty over the occupied Palestinian territory. So we call on the international community, including to Mr. Trump, to impose on Israel sanctions and to stop what Israel is doing in the occupied Palestinian territory, mainly the annexation.
Well, look, you can hear the frustration there by that individual from the Palestinian Authority saying, look, it calls on Trump to take action to impose sanctions on Israel for this. The reality, though, isn't it, that the Palestinian Authority has extremely little authority here?
Has very little authority with governing their own people and their own land, and have zero leverage on the government of Israel. And that's the reality of the situation on the ground. I would suggest that perhaps the French president needs to weigh in on this, because he was part of the Saudi-French initiative, which was brought to the United Nations and the General Assembly and got a strong vote to the entire international community, fostering a two-state solution, which is what the government of Israel is trying to prevent.
All right, Gershon Baskin, really good to get your thoughts on this today. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you.